Hello and welcome to Law and Omen. My name's Kristin. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few more weeks and Chanel will be joining us once again, and we'll go back to full-length episodes where we cover true crime and paranormal stories. I know I'm very excited for Chanel to come back. It has been so weird recording by myself. But for today we're going to be reading some Ouija board experiences. I covered the basic history and rules of the Ouija board in episode 3, called Load Shedding Preparation and Signing Out of the Ouija board. So do go listen to that if you want to learn more about what these boards are. In this episode, however, we're going to explore some of the creepiest tales of experiences people have had when using a Ouija board. Whether you believe or not, these are definitely interesting and worth hearing this spooky season. These first stories are from Thought Catalog. All sources will be in the show notes. My first mistake was insulting it. My friend had mentioned that she had one, so I asked her to pull the board out so I could check it out. At first she said no, but then agreed to do it as long as she didn't have to participate. After she had the board set up, I asked, "Is anyone in here?" Nothing. So, being a dumb teenager, I said, "If anything is in here and not talking, you're a coward." The board was put away after that. Fast forward about a week later, and I'm sleeping upstairs on my couch. I wake up on a stereotypical stormy night. Thunder, lightning, wind and rain, the works. I look around to see why I woke up and I couldn't see a thing. So I decided to try to fall back asleep. After laying there for about 30 seconds, I heard from downstairs, "Get the boy," in a very raspy, wispy voice. I open my eyes and listen. Nothing. I start to go back to sleep. "Get the boy." It was much louder this time. Then my downstairs door slammed shut. I freaked out because no one slept down there and everything was closed, so there was no draft. A creepy doll. I have a terrifying story about a Ouija board. I got a call from my cousin who said that he, his brother, his dad, and his best friend were using a Ouija board in their basement. Prior to starting, they took a large porcelain doll out of the room because it was creepy, and they placed it in an adjacent room face down on a pile of towels. My cousin took a short break because the board was just spouting nonsense, and he left the room. His dad, brother, and friend started asking the board questions about him. One of the questions was, "Who is in the other room?" It just started spouting random numbers, and when my cousin went back into the room, his brother said that it wasn't working and they were just going to put it away. He showed him the answer to the last question, and my cousin said, "Dude, that's my social security number." Then they started to talk to whatever was giving them these answers. It told my cousin he would die in the Air Force. At this point, they tell the entity they are communicating with to prove itself. It then spelt out the word, "doll." They opened the door to check on the porcelain doll they had laid in the other room, and when they opened the door, the doll was standing up right in front of the door, staring right at them. Everyone freaked and ran right out of the house. My best friend burnt the Ouija board, and I think he temporarily went nuts for a few months. My cousin for some reason then joined the Air Force and is on a base in Europe now. Choked. I have no evidence, and I do not care if you don't believe me. I've used this board with results and let something into my home. I have been physically assaulted by this entity. It started out with that feeling like you're being watched, doors closing, footsteps on the hardwood when you're home alone, and it progressed slowly into being kept awake by something shaking the bed or pulling off the covers, sometimes even whispering my name. The board would disappear for days on end, and then show up in places I would never have put it. I became obsessed with it. Then it was a black mass in the corner of the room, or a silhouette of a man watching you from the doorway. After that it escalated pretty quickly. I had my hair pulled, fingers pricked, scratched, choked, held down in bed while this thing whispered in my ear in what could have only been Latin. We had our house blessed, and the bad thing hasn't shown back up. Just the normal occurrences now. But I will never again play with one of those boards. Our first mistake. My wife and I had some unexplained things going on in the house we were renting. We got a board so we could try to figure out what we were dealing with. Bad idea. We used the board one night to speak with, hopefully, our spirit. What we didn't realize is that Ouija boards open the door for anything to come through and speak. The planchette flew off the board near the end of our session, and we had no real answers to anything. We were speaking with something, but it was very evasive with its answers. Things got worse in the house, and we eventually broke our lease and moved. Radios and TVs going on by themselves, water running, After the board, things just got bad. Voices, moving objects, and my wife says I got possessed one night, but I can't validate that as I was asleep. We lost 10 hours. My friend and I were about 14 or 15 years old. We had a Ouija board that we used quite often. I always thought she was pushing the planchette for the fun factor, and I never took it too seriously. One night we started, it was around 9 p.m, and we began getting very strange sayings. None of them I can remember 27 years later. We got a name. I have forgotten it, but I know that he said he was from Malaysia. He was there to protect us. I do remember that much. The next thing we know, it's 7 a.m. It was like we blinked and the sun was up. It was very freaky. We lost 10 hours of our life. Neither of us remember anything about it. We were just sitting there at the table staring at each other like, what happened? Too bad we didn't have a third person there to tell us. She would never use a Ouija board again. I did though, but I never had that happen again. Accurate death prediction. I was staying at a hotel with friends in Northern Ontario for a chess tournament. Can't exactly remember the town. Anyway, we were looking for some thrills at night and someone busted out a board. You know, one of those official ones you get from Toys R Us. We asked a few questions. I can't remember them, but I will never forget when we asked if it knew if any of us was going to die. Yeah, I know, a strange question to ask. It spelled out a person's name that was with us at the time, and then a date, which was approximately a year later. My friend died a year later from cancer. He knew about it 6 months before he had died. To this day, I'm still curious about the Ouija board, but I will never touch it again. It knew Arabic. I always thought these things were BS. However, years ago this changed when I did it once with some random people at a get-together. We were talking to all sorts of different spirits, and I wasn't taking any of it seriously. Then I thought of a way to put this to the test. I'm Kuwaiti American, and I was born in Kuwait, so I know Arabic and knew of a friend of my brother that passed away recently. I asked to speak with him. Now, only one person knew me at the get-together, and even then didn't know that much about me. I was definitely the only one who could speak Arabic. I was in Oklahoma at the time. So, I asked in Arabic how he died. The board spelled out car crash. I was a bit shocked, but still didn't buy it completely. So I asked a more detailed question. I asked in Arabic how old he was when he died. It pointed to 1 and then 3. That's when I started really freaking out. No one would have ever known of these details, let alone understood what I was asking. I asked for more details on the crash. He flew out the sunroof. And after that I stopped. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. Figure 8. A girl bought her authentic Ouija board made out of maple straight from Salem. Ironically, she was very Catholic, but she loved her board. And we had a few interesting nights in the dorm with it. I think the second night we were playing with it, it was going slow, not much movement. I had my hand off the planchette because I still wasn't so sure about this thing. Suddenly, it was like cold fingers grabbed into my shoulders ever so slightly, and this terrible feeling in the back of my mind just came to the surface. I looked at the board and the planchette started moving in a figure 8. I looked at the girl and said, I have a bad feeling about that. Luckily in time for her to realize what was happening. She stopped the movement and bid the spirit goodbye. In that moment, the icy grip loosened as well. Everyone was like, whoa. When this girl explained that the figure 8 meant that something was trying to get out of the board. Max is always around. When I was about 14, my best friend had a sleepover birthday party. Being the silly little girls we were, we decided to make a Ouija board to use. Not really knowing any of the rules, like making it say goodbye. After an hour or so, I wandered off to read some tarot cards and watch the rest of The Exorcist with the other couple of girls who didn't want to communicate with spirits. Here's where it got weird. After I left, the spirit talking to my friends changed. As in, it switched to a different spirit altogether. His name was Matt, and he was looking for me. I've never known a Max in my life. My friends yelled out what he was saying as it moved, and I was writing it off as them teasing me, until he started giving them information about me that no one at the party knew. Things about minor abuse I was facing and other little things. That freaked me out. I begged for them to stop playing, even after Max tried to convince me that he was not trying to hurt me. My friends were awesome and stopped playing before I started crying, and I thought that was the end of it. The next time a Ouija board came out was the next year, and only one girl from the original party was among the group. We were baking a cake, so when the buzzer went off, she and I headed up to take it out of the oven. When we got back to the group, another girl turned to me and asked, "Who's Max?" Apparently he stuck around after that first time. If my friends want to use a Ouija board, they don't invite me over unless they want to speak to Max. He's always around. A few times in my life, I've heard a voice call out my name. It usually makes me stop for a minute. At least twice, if I had not stopped, I would have been in the path of a car going too fast to stop and it would have hit me. I strongly believe Max has stuck around to be helpful, but had we not pulled out that Ouija board, I would have never known about him. The following stories are from Cafe Mom, however they originated from Reddit. Creepy Coincidence by Tammy. My sister and I messed around with the Ouija board a few times when we were teenagers. Every time we used the board, we seemed to communicate with the same spirit named Ed, who constantly threatened our brother during the sessions. Even though our brother, who was 4 or 5 years old at the time, was nowhere near us. It scared us so much that we threw out the board. We never mentioned a word of this to our brother. A few years later, our brother brought home a friend's Ouija board. After he and a friend used the board a few times, he told us he was a little freaked out because a spirit named Ed kept threatening him. Our mother banned Ouija boards from the house after that incident. Moving Skulls by Anonymous. My fiancé at the time and I were sitting on my bed with an old board that a friend had found on the side of the road. We asked who was with us, and it said, Mo. I asked, are you a demon, spirit, or angel? He said, demon by your creation. We were a bit freaked out, but we kept going. We asked more simple questions, like, how many are with you? He replied, 7. What is your favorite poster that I had? It replied, bloody mess. I pointed at a kiss photo I had of Gene Simmons with his tongue out while blood was everywhere in and around his mouth. This one? I asked, and the board replied, yes. After a few more questions, I asked him to move my skulls on my TV because we wanted to know if this was fake or not. Mo replied, close eyes. And after a few seconds went by, all of the skulls were facing us. How could that be faked? We were the only 2 people in the room at the time, all while sitting very close to one another. Working on Its Own by Anonymous. When I was about 16, I found an old school Ouija board at a thrift store. It was made of real wood, not paper like they are now. It was thin, but still wood. Balsa, I think. I was intrigued with it, so I took it home. Me and a gal pal were playing with it, but nothing was happening, so we just gave up on it, left it on the bed, and went out for snacks. There was no window open, no random draft, no air conditioner on at the time, no fan, nothing that could have caused it. But when we came back with snacks and drinks, that board was working on its own. The planchette was traveling all over the board, and it was spelling out a foul word. For a moment, we just stood there and watched it spelling out that word several times. Then my friend scooped it up and broke it. We then covered it up with salt and got rid of it in a safe place. Communication with a Great-Grandfather by Sarah. A friend of mine brought a Ouija board to a sleepover, and I had never played with one, so I was really excited to try it. My 2 friends eventually got bored of it as the night wore on, so I wanted to ask one last question. I asked the board, do you have any questions for us? And it answered yes. I asked, what's your name? And it answered, Abe. My friends and I immediately joked that it was Abraham Lincoln. I asked, who do you want to talk to? It answered, Erica. Now, Erica is my mother's name, but she was downstairs and completely not involved with us. I asked, what do you want to say to her? It answered, wish I knew her. This was so incredibly specific, I couldn't imagine what it meant. I ran downstairs to find my mom, and I asked her if she knew anyone named Abe. She said yes. Her grandfather was named Abe, but he died before she was born. I didn't know my great-grandfather's name, and my friends certainly didn't. Stern Warning by Strange Objects 123. A few years ago, my friends decided to try this out with a group of guys. We were in the 12th grade at the time. My group of girls had messed around with the Ouija board before, to varying degrees of success. Well, this time it was my hands on the planchette with my other girlfriend. This thing was moving crazy fast. Faster than I had ever seen, and it seemed to be getting quite agitated by the group of guys we were with, who were joking around and not taking it seriously. It essentially told them to shut up and stop talking. I told the guys, seriously, please stop being rude, I'm kind of freaked out. Because I was getting nervous, one of the guys took over, and he was a bit more serious about it. Almost immediately, the thing spelled out, don't open the door. Well, we were all in the basement, and there was only one door, so we all kind of looked over at it nervously. Because I was getting anxious, I took the blanket and kind of hid my face. Immediately it spelled out, don't hide from me. Everyone was freaked out. The guy who had his hands on the planchette literally started to cry. He wanted to take his hands off, but we have this rule that you don't take your hands off until you get to say goodbye. Everyone wanted to stop, but it took about 10 minutes of asking dumb questions until the thing finally slid to goodbye. Some of the guys speculated afterwards that it meant don't open the metaphorical door of the spiritual world. The reason being is we told them to never ask for a sign, or else it kind of lets the spirit roam free outside the board. Before the guy took over, they had kept asking for a sign, only for me to cut them off mid-sentence and tell them to knock it off. So this made some sense. Underground Haunted City by MillyBob35. I am from Edinburgh, and it is famous for its underground haunted city. I, along with a friend, spent the night down there, creepy as hell. One of the activities was a Ouija board. My friend and I sat down to play and all was going well. The usual describing who was here, apparently wanting the place, etc. This continued for about half an hour when I kindly asked the board if I could leave. I was granted a yes. Around 10 minutes after me, my friend asked to leave and was promptly told no. The entity would just not let her leave. The movements on the board got faster, erratic, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Only when several people in the room started crying did this entity let everyone leave. One of the most bizarre and scariest things I've ever witnessed. Safe to say, I have never gone near one again. Flash of Light by Lullaby. I made a Ouija board when I was in middle school. It was made of wood from one of the trees in my backyard, and the planchette was a glass half circle that my grandmother gave us. We were set up in the living room at midnight, with the only light being from candles. My best friends and I asked if anyone was speaking to us. The answer was yes. I asked how many ghosts were present, and the answer was 7. My cat, Casey, came up to us at this point. He stopped just beyond where we were sitting. He looked around and slowly weaved his way past us as if stepping around people. Then the planchette quickly dragged our hands to spell out, "Happy to talk." As soon as that sentence was spelled out, a blinding streak of light that looked like a shooting star flashed from one side of the living room to the other. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It lit up my living room with an intense silvery light. The next few stories are from Castle of Chaos. If You Play with Fire by Anonymous. I played with a Ouija board several times many years ago. I got mainly dark and scary replies with names we didn't know. One claimed to be my uncle though. We started to do it all the time, every day, with a homemade board. A few weeks later, I was in a club, saw a friend I hadn't seen for maybe 2 years from across the room. He literally came running over to me with a strange look on his face. He said, "I can't believe it's you. I have something strange to tell you, but you have to listen to me." Before I could answer him, he went on. "I went to see a reader. She told me that she had a message for a friend of mine, a woman. She said your name. She told me to tell you to stop playing with the Ouija board because you're going to get burnt. Does that make sense to you?" I was speechless and really scared. I don't know if that was for real, but how else could that have happened? I am sure as hell never touching one again. A Ghost by Any Other Name. Myself and a close friend have used the Ouija board a handful of times over the last few years. Every time we have played and asked who we were speaking to, it tells us Allison. Our good friend Allison committed suicide 8 years ago. Most of the questions we ask her were answered with her spelling out Mom. Most of the time the vibe feels good and nothing weird happens. One night we were playing and all of a sudden the mood switched. The vibe in the room was eerie and something didn't feel right. We both sensed it and asked if Allison was still with us, and it said no. We decided to end the session when the planchette started moving very fast around the whole board. If our fingers hadn't been planted firmly, it would have flew right off the board. We said our closing saying and said goodbye to whoever the hell we let in. We put it away and the eerie, dark feeling in the room went away as well. Say goodbye. When I was in my first year of university, we started playing with a homemade Ouija board. There were like 5 of us. We contacted some spirit, whose name I'm glad to have forgotten. And as we were talking to it, the doorbell rang, and one of our friends had to go, as her dad was there to pick her up. We didn't close the session by saying goodbye to the spirit, as we had no clue. We just threw the paper away. Now, the girl that had to leave early started acting strange and didn't hang with the rest of us as much. A few months later, she told us she was getting a cleansing as she wasn't feeling like herself. And she told us that the moment she stepped in the door, the witch lady that was going to cleanse her totally freaked out and told her she had a spirit with her and used the very same name that we had seen on the Ouija board many months before. She told my friend that the spirit was following her because we didn't close the session, and she attempted to cleanse her without any success. She tried to commit suicide about 3 times after this, dropped out of university, and went to live somewhere else, so I've now lost touch with her. And that was our collection of creepy Ouija board experiences people have had. Definitely a reminder that if you're going to play with the Ouija board, you should follow the rules. Thank you so much for listening to this week's minisode. I hope that you enjoyed it. We're just a week away from Halloween, so hopefully this helped get you into the spooky mood. If you have your own Ouija board stories or encounters and you'd like to send them through to us, you can do so at info@lawandomen.com. If you want more information about the podcast or find links to where you can listen, you can find that at lawandomen.com. We have social media. You can find us with the handle lawandomen. We're on all major streaming platforms and we release new episodes every Sunday. We have a Patreon page and we also have merch if you would like to support us. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you joining in every week. That's it from me. I hope that you have a great week further and I'll catch you next time. Bye!